Perhaps you are one of these people, practical people, who read rational books filled with all sorts of clues, detectives going about in a professional manner, and really turning out a rather prosaic product. A murder mystery, the problem solved, good returns triumphant. And yet, these same people, when confronted with a book by Michael Hines, also a murder mystery, they find themselves wondering what's going on. I don't understand. Why? They get to the middle of the first chapter and then they stop. It seems that far too many of these practical people, expecting a prosaic murder mystery, have missed the jokes. Because in Michael Hines, you're going to find, just like you do in Edmund Crispin's works, you're going to find a lot of humor, interspersed with stereotypes being made fun of, philosophies made fun of. You're going to hear things that are clues that you won't be able to understand. The situation will be amazing. Improbabilities will happen. You have to learn to appreciate the British humor at that time in order to get the full effect of the story, so you can have a true appreciation of what was actually written. For example, in The Secret Vanguard, you are introduced to a successful minor poet named Philip Ploss. He is called a Cowan Gate poet. He's very derivative, hence he's a minor poet, but still, he's using his own talent. Now, even though he's a minor poet, producing minor art, he is surrounded by a great deal of major art. He was listening, for example, as is stated, Opus 131. Does this mean something? Indeed it does. But unless you know your Beethoven, you probably won't get it. So how does one read a Michael Hines book so that one does get it? Okay. Now, when you are reading a Michael Hines book, please have a pen and paper handy. Then you write down anything you don't understand. Each item, just write it down when it comes. You'll be invited to divert yourself, to digress, as it were. If you notice a digression, write it down. If there's a quotation in there, such as tempus edax rerum, which is Latin, of course, write it down. Or as Heraclitus said, and was also quoted by our hero of this story, Pantare. What does Pantare mean? Is it apropos to the story? All of these I've mentioned so far are very much so apropos to the story. Opus 31, it means something. Pantare means something. It's important to understand that Dr. Bohr's portrait is a Rayburn. And you have to know why Tufton said tempus edax rerum. So you put down anything you don't understand at the moment, then again continue on with the story. Yes, chapter 1 is slow. deliberately slow. And when you get to chapter 4, and you read the first paragraph, you will get the joke. Because the joke is set up in chapter 1, but the punchline isn't delivered until chapter 4. But of course, if you stop reading the book after halfway through chapter 1, you're not going to get the joke at all. And you'll miss a very point about writing. You can drag the pace of a story to make a point. You can speed the pace of a story to make a point. Then, when you're done with the story, look up all the things, Opus 131, Tempest Edax rerun, Panta Ray. Look it all up, and then you see what the big point is. Why Sheila was reminiscing about a sentry standing on the guardhouse atop the Firth Bridge in 1917. Now, once you've looked everything up, try to understand what it means to the story. What does it add to the story? What is the point of the story? And yes, there's a lot of hilarity in there. So, this is how you read things when you don't quite get it. That way you don't miss the jokes. Ambrose Heatherton is a fine joke. He's also an English stereotype. He's being gently made fun of. Very gently, though. Now, Philip Plass is also an example of what people generally think of as an Epicurean man. And yes, it's going to be rather different than what most people think. They think of a man living such a slippers by the fireside, quiet life as a failure of nerve. Rather say that he is a man who sees no reason to join the other rats in the rat race. Why should he? He has inherited his manor house. He has inherited several £1,000 a year, back when that was money. Why should he work? Why should he take a job that someone else might need? He has no need. He has his vocation. He exercises such talent as he has. And every so often, his verses get published in a literary magazine. And every few years, those poems that have been published are gathered up into a book. And you have another slender book of more poems by Philip Plass. Why should he work? The money he gets from this, without any expense, pays for his matinees and his dinners out with a lady friend. I mean, really. Sounds like almost every man's favorite retirement. Add fishing, perhaps. Now, in much the same vein, you get Edmund Crispin. People don't understand him either. It's ridiculous. What's there to understand? Now, when we used the book Secret Vanguard for Michael Hines, this time for Edmund Crispin, we're using Swan Song. Because Edmund Crispin's a professional musician. So he understands music and artistic temperament, shall we say. Now, in this one we have 2 dead bodies and 2 murderers. And oddly enough, It's the murderers who end up dead. In fact, they've killed each other off. And they weren't the target. But unlike Michaeline's, you won't have the quotations, the invitations to digress, and go look up who Rayburn actually was, who is Dr. Borer, and why Bishop Sweetapple's papers interested someone. I mean, really. The invitations are everywhere in a Michaeline's book. Edmund Crispin? No. Now, yes, he can write a flaming farce, and in fact, he seems to enjoy doing so. Especially a really good car chase. He likes Charles. And his driving is not to be wondered at, please. But you have to understand, all these writers at this period, this particular genre of British writers, all come from the same stable, and they're just talking the same language. They all had received an Oxford education of the time. So yes, they do know their Latin and their Greek. And yes, they're going to use it. They're going to have that sang-froid, stiff upper lip and all that. They're going to talk in elliptical references. They're going to allude to things rather than say things. But with Edmund Crispin, you won't need your handy piece of paper and pen to write this down. All you have to do is keep reading. Keep reading, keep reading. And you will see that the target of both murders was a perfectly innocent man who harmed nobody. And they all had... I mean, yes, it's improbable. But is it so improbable it could not in fact happen? I don't think so. And in both of these books, you have quite a firm conclusion. Michaeline's ends with a burst of humor. Edmund Crispin ends up with two couples getting married. But then, that's because our professional musician, Edmund Crispin, is a romantic at heart. Whereas Michaeline's is a crusty old university professor. I hope this helps. I hope you learn to enjoy a somewhat drier sense of humor and having little jokes played on you. It's quite interesting, really. But it's the difference between, the madcap professors and the prosaic Sherlock Holmes, who is an intolerable bore. There's nothing boring about Gervase Fenn, the hero of Edmund Crispin's mysteries, or Sir John Appleby, the hero of Michaeline's. And no, he's not titled until he retires, because he worked at Scotland Yard. Okay? So, thank you for watching. I hope this does help. So, thank you. And please do come again.